your previous exhibition, that was mostly ceramics, but your new exhibition that you're working on, your new works, those are mostly paintings, correct?
I still don't know yet. Right
Oh.
now, I'm telling myself that they're going to be paintings and mixed media drawings,
Okay.
but maybe later on it might change. What you guys are looking at right now on the floor is a beginning of a body of work that'll be about 20 to 30 pieces total, and each one is going to reflect a different portrait of a person of color. And these portraits vary from archival footage, archival photograph, as well as pictures that I take on my phone when I go into different spaces in the community. And so to kind of give you guys some context about how these drawings and mixing media pieces are done. So what I've been doing for the past couple years is I would go into a certain location and I would gather different plant life from that location. And then I would bring them into the studio and create stencils from these plant life. And so in a sense, I'm mapping out South Florida through the ecology that is growing around these different kinds of neighborhood. The neighborhoods that I'm focusing primarily on are Black and Brown communities that are being displaced as a result of development that is happening here in South Florida. So I'll kind of pan the camera a little bit closer to kind of see the details.
I love the color palette that you chose. They're so bright.
Thank you. So the color palette definitely comes from the Caribbean. I feel like when you look at the architecture in the Caribbean, oftentimes they're very bold and they command space. And so with these figures, I'm going for a look that's both regal and then giving them agency within each of their individual portraits. I use, again, mixed media. So even on this one, I'm using a mason stain, which is a raw organic compound that I would use in my ceramic work. But in this context, I'm using it on top of the paper. And then on top of it is a husk of the coconut, which is treated like a paper, to create different kinds of textures and dimension within the work.
Okay. Can you show us some of, after this, would you be able to show us some of your ceramic work? Because I've seen them and I just think everyone else should see how awesome they are and just how you're able, you have mastery over your paintings, but you also have mastery over your ceramic work. And they tend to be small and delicate. And I just think that's really amazing.
Let me just grab this one very quickly from my table. So this is one of the works from my solo exhibition from last year. And you can kind of see the details. A lot of the flora and fauna is being repeated in a lot of the work. So that's one kind of thread that weaves and intersect my work. When I think of ceramic as a medium, is the only material that intersects human history in terms of culture, time, history, demographic. It transcends all of those different realms. Without ceramic, archaeologists would be missing a large part of our human history. So through the shards that are left behind in our human history, we're able to understand the dietary needs of a certain culture, the medicine they take, certain rituals that were done. And so ceramic, it's an incredible material. I even think of it as this magical realism. For those of you guys that kind of follow like the Bible and things like that, when you think of like in the beginning, how man was kind of formed from the earth. So you're essentially using the same infinite material that came from the ground, and then you're transforming it through fire to become this very viscous object. So for me, is I use it because there's so many different properties and elements in how it intersects culture, religion, and these different things for me. I'm gonna move on from the floor and then kind of pan around in the studio. So I'm working on different sizes. So this is another piece I'm working on. I don't know what's going to happen yet, but this is the very beginning of it. I work very organically and kind of just let the paper decide what they want to do. And then from the smaller guys, I'm also going to be doing some larger work. So these are still in progress. As you can see, the same textures again from the flora and the fauna I've been gathering. And then another kind of element I've been working with is the idea of kind of fencing. When you think of a fence, it either brings you in or it keeps you out. And so within the context of climate gentrification, the communities that I'm focusing on are being displaced. And through this displacement, they don't really have oftentimes the equity or the capital to move and go. So for me, I feel like through these work, I might be capturing like the last image and energy in these communities, because in the next, let's say 50 to 60 years, these communities might be completely gone, including the people that live in them.
How do you see climate gentrification playing out in Miami specifically? Because I know Miami's pretty much on the water and they get hit by hurricanes that are worse every year.
Yeah. I think, out of the states, Miami, we're in a unique position where we're surrounded by water all around. And so I think we're like ground zero for testing out what climate change would look like in the US.
Okay.
Even if you go further south from Miami down to Key West, last year from the hurricane that hit them, there was a lot of the properties that are damaged. And so these properties are deemed unsafe to live in. And the residents are trying to get the US government to buy these homes because you can't live in them and you can't sell them because they're not deemed livable. So the only thing they can do is try to get the US government to give them some kind of payment or monetary value for the loss of that property. And so because these people can't live in their home, there was a massive exit of people leaving the Florida Keys and trying to move further north or out of the state of Florida in general. So I think as a small kind of sample to see what the impact of climate can be, if we look at Key West and what has happened to certain residents in that region, just imagine that bigger in Miami where the population is, over like 6 million people here. So, it's very frightening and very scary in terms of that. So you can see like, in some of the work, this is another one I'm working on. This is
Could
done
you get
with
closer so we could see?
Yeah, sure. So this is done with tissue paper, cobalt black, which is another raw organic material that I use in my ceramic work. When I think of this, I think of the idea of kind of map also. So if you're in a plane or in a helicopter, you're looking down at the landscape is what I think about when I'm viewing something like this in terms of the way the mark making, the different foliage. It makes me think of oil, when oil spills into the ocean and the amount of damage that it causes. So there's different factors affecting us on all front. Just yesterday, the Biscayne waters, there's been a massive amount of dead fish washing up in the water because there's a lot of pollution that is being dumped into the bay. And so again, in 2020, we just had 3 years ago, a massive die-off of marine life. It continues on, and there's no policy being put in place to make that happen.